know what city you're zooming in from. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Tea and Coffee Tuesday. Please put your first name in the chat and let us know what city you're zooming in from. Good morning. Put your first name in the chat. Let us know what city you're zooming in from. Good morning. Welcome to Tea and Coffee Tuesday. Please put your first name in the chat. Let us know what city you're zooming in from. Welcome, everyone. Please put your first name in the chat. Let us know what city you're zooming in from. Welcome to Tea and Coffee Tuesday. Please put your first name in the chat. Let us know what city you're zooming in from. Good morning. Please put your first name in the chat. Let us know what city you're zooming in from. Welcome, everyone, to Tea and Coffee Tuesdays. I'm Jacqueline Cole, and I'll be your host today, and I'm very glad you could join us. Before we jump in, we ask everyone to observe the following meeting agreements so everyone can have a good experience. Please keep yourself on mute. Let's not have distracting background noises. Use the chat to raise questions and add comments, and assume everyone's good intentions using respectful language and tone. Please note, if your camera is on, we can see what is happening in your background. This meeting is being recorded, so those who can't be with us today can still view the program later on our AARP YouTube channel. So please click OK when it appears on your screen. If you're not familiar, AARP is the nation's largest nonprofit, nonpartisan organization dedicated to empowering Americans 50 and older to choose how they live as they age and to age with confidence. With a nationwide presence, AARP strengthens communities and advocates for what matters most to more than 100 million Americans 50 plus and their families, including health, financial security, and personal fulfillment. So, who is in the audience today, Sarita? Who do you see in the chat? Those of you who haven't already, please put your name in the chat.
Jacqueline, we have so many people from all over the country. It's wonderful. And I'm just going to read a few names just randomly over here. We've got Casey from Sugar Grove, Illinois. We've got Carol from Brea, California. We've got somebody from Tucson, Arizona, Long Beach, California, Nashville, Tennessee. We've got a couple of people from Alaska. We've got Terry from Atwood, Georgia, Sarasota, Florida, just people from all over the country. So it's really wonderful to see so many people joining us here today.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Sarita, and thank all of you for sharing in the chat. We really do have a nationwide presence today, and we appreciate all of you being here. We appreciate you joining us today to talk about saving money on everyday costs. To get us warmed up today, we have a poll question and ask you to quickly submit your answers. The poll is anonymous. Do, do you know the peak and off-peak hours for your gas and electric service? Yes, no. Okay, interesting. Running neck, almost neck and neck. Okay, so it's looking like 59% of us say yes, we do know our peak and off-peak hours, and 41% are not aware at this time. Thank you for that. And then our next poll question is, should you ignore your oil change sticker in your car? Yes or no? Okay, I don't have. Uh, that came in quick. 8% says yes, and 92% say no. Okay, we're going to get an answer on that. And our final question, do you use self-checkout at the store? Yeah, is 65% say yes, and 35% say no. So we're going to get all the answers on saving money in those areas that we can today. Thank you for participating in the poll. It is now my pleasure to introduce our guest speaker, J.R. Fujita from our AARP California Sacramento office. J.R. began his career at AARP in 2017 and serves as Senior State and Community Engagement Specialist in Sacramento. He manages the California District Liaison Volunteer Program, serves as state lead for the California Veterans and Military Families Initiative, is involved with the California Employer Pledge Program, works on community outreach and engagement efforts with the Hispanic and Latino population, and manages the Movies for Grown-Ups program in the greater Sacramento area. Outside of work, I don't know how he has any more time, but okay. Outside of work, JR currently volunteers with the Sacramento Medical Corps Reserve and the Making Strides Against Breast Cancer Walk of Sacramento. He is also a volunteer captain for the Rock and Roll Marathon Series in Las Vegas. And a few facts about JR and traveling. JR cannot stand eating pickles, mustard, peppers, tomatoes, mushrooms, eggplant, bean sprouts, and anything spicy. JR has stayed loyal to one airline and has flown over 600,000 lifetime miles, well on his way to million-mile lifetime status. He has also stayed loyal to one hotel chain, staying over 500 nights, and is also closing in on having lifetime preferred status with them. So as a reminder, please put any questions you have for JR in the chat during the program, and he will answer them, allowing time during the question and answer portion of our program. JR, welcome. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Good morning, everyone, and thanks for joining us wherever you are. We're going to go ahead and get started here today, and I encourage you to have your camera ready or a pad of paper with a pen, because I'm going to share some great tips that you can use to save money on everyday costs. Just as a quick reminder for today's presentation, it is general guidance, not legal or financial advice. Individual circumstances may differ and should always be taken into consideration before acting. And so again, we know each person's situation is different. Your resources may vary, and so we encourage you to keep that in mind for our presentation today. So a lot of us are probably feeling a lot of effects in our pocketbooks. And it's hard to believe, but the nation faces 1970s style pricing on everything from garbage bags to gasoline to food and more. And I know a lot of us are probably trying to figure out how are other ways I can save money, because maybe your retirement check, your social security check, or if you're still working, your regular paycheck, as we all know, that doesn't change when inflation does, and it stays pretty stable. But there are different ways we can save money when inflation is squeezing our budget. And so today's presentation will provide you a variety of different ways you can save money on everyday costs. So the first thing that comes to mind is going to be when we go grocery shopping. Most of the time, we don't take the time to plan before we shop. And so we often will go to the store because we know we need some groceries. You go, and then what happens? You start picking up a whole bunch of things you don't need. And before you know it, you check out and you spent $100 when you went to pick up 2 items. The other thing a lot of people will do is they won't take time to do some research. And so some people are very diligent at looking at weekly ads, clipping coupons, or doing some comparison shopping. And again, if you take that time, you'll find different ways to save money. Especially in the pandemic, a lot of us decided to do some adventurous cooking. And so we often bought a bunch of ingredients. We might have purchased some seasonings that we've used one time. And so it's important to consider what you have. Take a look at your pantry and the refrigerator, what's left on your shelf, to figure out what can you make. Some people like to buy in bulk, and it can be especially harder if you're in a 1 or 2 person household, because sometimes you'll buy a whole bunch of stuff in bulk and then you won't use it, and then you end up throwing some of it out. But whenever you can, buy in bulk tends to oftentimes be cheaper. The only other time it is more cost effective is going to be when items may be on sale. One of the tips that we also have at AARP is to consider imperfect foods. And so there's different services that are available out there where you may be able to buy some produce that may not look good, but in actuality, it's perfectly fine. You also need to consider using the right card. And so some grocery stores may have frequent buyer cards where they offer special discounts. And then you may have some credit cards, for example, that will offer certain rewards. Store brands are often also a great alternative as well. And based on our poll earlier, 2/3 of you indicated you do use self-checkout. Believe it or not, using self-checkout is a great way to save money. At the self-checkout, you're more likely to be watching which registers open up next. When is it my turn? You'll also notice a lot of self-checkouts, they have a lot less items for you to grab there. If you go to a cashier, you're more likely to be paying more attention to what type of treats are there, who is on the front cover of a magazine, and then that's when you start to pick up some additional items and you're spending additional money that you had not planned. Also related to groceries is gardening. So right now, when costs are very high, it may be more effective to grow vegetables yourself. It can be easy to grow a bunch of items, to share it with family, friends, and neighbors, and to swap. It's also a great way to be able to preserve or to can items that you'll be able to use for an entire year. Another thing you can do is to seed swap. And so what you may want to do is to have different types of seeds, and you may not need to use a whole package, and you can share and swap with others. A lot of times now, our landscaping can be very expensive depending where you are, especially if you're on a water meter. And so for places where you're paying for your water by your use, you may want to consider to use more friendly landscaping where it doesn't need as much water. And in some places, you may also be able to get a rebate if you remove your grass. And so depends on where you are, but those are some tips on gardening. So when it comes to our vehicles, a lot of us like to get somewhere as quick as we can, but the tip is going to be to brake less and coast more. That way you'll use less gas, you'll also not put as much wear and tear on your car, including your tires. Sometimes when we purchase our tires, we think, oh, we want a really good tire. And in fact, you're going to be paying for something you may not need. So for example, I'm in Sacramento, and where I live, we don't have snow. And so if I buy a really nice tire that's good in the snow, I may be spending additional money that I don't need to spend. And so that's an important thing to keep in mind. Before you buy gas, it's important to kind of check prices. A general rule of thumb is on Tuesdays, those tend to be the less expensive time to buy gas. Some people have learned to believe that when it's cooler, you get more gas. But in fact, Consumer Reports recently did a research study, and it actually does not really matter. There's very little difference if you buy gas when it's cooler versus when it's hotter. If you're going to sell your car or you want to get a new one, you'll oftentimes be able to make more money if you sell your car privately rather than trading it in or turning it into a car dealer. Also consider an electric vehicle. As we've seen, gas prices continue to rise. It's becoming a lot more expensive, and so electric may be the way to go depending on how much driving you're going to do. Now, based on our poll earlier today, 8% of you said to ignore that oil change sticker. And that 8% is correct. Your car dealership, remember, is in business or where you're getting your oil changed. They want you to keep coming back and spending money. Most of the time, they're going to give you a standard length of time or a certain distance to change your oil, when in fact, most vehicles today can go a little bit longer than what they put on that sticker. And so it's going to be important to look at your car manual to see what is recommended. For example, some cars now suggest that you get your oil changed every 6,000 miles. And perhaps where you get your oil changed now, they're saying, do it every 5,000 miles. And so it's important to take a look at your manual. That oil change sticker is kind of a guide and is generally helpful, but most of the time, especially with newer vehicles, that sticker is not going to be very effective. And so those are things to just kind of keep in mind when it comes to your car. I want to turn it over to see if we have a few questions that we can take before we continue.
So, GR, we have a lot of comments, but there's one question here. It says, why consider an AV? They're so much more expensive to buy. And I wonder if you can comment on that.
Sure. So that's a great question. It really depends on your own situation. If you're going to have a vehicle you're going to drive a lot, in the long run, electric costs will be a lot cheaper than purchasing gasoline. The other thing to also take a look at is to see if there are certain rebates that may be available to you. And so those are things to look at. I know electric vehicles tend to have a higher price tag to start. And so it really depends on your situation, on how often are you driving, how long do you expect to have your vehicle. And so those are things to factor in, but it's always important to consider one, especially if you are going to going to purchase a new vehicle.
Thank you. The others are just comments and interactions between people. Somebody here says they're concerned with self-checkout because there's a concern about employment and cashiers. And a lot of people like the human interaction and prefer to go to a checkout. And also it helps because sometimes a cashier will help you with grocery bags, taking the grocery bags to your car. So just comments, so no real questions, but I just wanted to share that with you.
Very good. And I do have one person that sent me a private question. And their question is, do membership stores really save you money in the long run? And that's a great question as well. Again, it depends on your situation and how often are you making purchases and in what quantity. And so it's important to consider that because when you do membership clubs, generally they're probably in the neighborhood of about $50 per year. And if you go quite frequently, you probably are going to save a lot more, especially if you're going to have bigger purchases. If you're only buying a few things at a time and not as often, it may be harder to recover that cost. And so that was a great question I received. We'll go ahead and continue on, and we'll have some additional time later for more questions. So for most people right now, especially this summer 2024, we know a lot of people are wanting to travel. And some basic tips to keep in mind is to go off season, consider weekdays, especially during the summertime. During the year, oftentimes midweek is going to be the cheaper time. And so plan your weekends, for example, on Wednesdays and Thursdays. You can also consider vacations where you don't need a vehicle. So that way you're not paying rental car, gas, parking, etc. You can also consider finding ways to save on airfare and hotels by planning ahead. And then the other thing too is to avoid high touristy areas or prime locations, especially if there may be a resort fee. And so staying a little further away from a iconic destination will also be a way that you can save money. When it comes to entertainment, there's a variety of ways we like to entertain ourselves. The real key is going to be to party early. What that means is earlier on the weekend, for example, is going to be cheaper than, let's say, a Saturday night. If you like to go to the movies and to have some fun, generally matinees are going to be cheaper than if you go in the evening. And a lot of times people are kind of confused by that, but really it's all about supply and demand. And so kind of keep that in mind. If you can plan something earlier or midweek, you're going to save money when it comes to entertainment. Credit cards may offer you discounts. I know some people will only use a debit card, for example. And sometimes that's also another way to save money because credit cards often have fees for the vendor. And so they may offer you a discount to use a debit card. The only thing to just be careful about is if it's a big purchase, credit cards generally provide you more protection than a debit card. And with a debit card, your money is instantly out of your account, and it may be a little bit harder to recover fraudulent and scam-related charges. It's also really a great idea for entertainment is, again, to do research. It might be to look at a customer or a business's website, follow them online. You may find special discounts or deals, especially if you mention it. There's also great ways to look at reviews to see what do people think about these companies and their services? You may also be able to find some special deals on a company's app on your smartphone device or your tablet. And then the other thing, of course, is midweek is kind of the key for a lot of the things that we do. For the most part, not in all cases, Tuesdays are generally the day when you'll also see discounts at malls, outlet stores, grocery stores. Some of them offer senior discounts. And so those are all things that you can look at as well when it comes to saving money. When it comes to our household, I know we all don't like doing chores, but it comes with having a home or renting in a place, but you have to keep it clean. A great tip is to make it yourself. And so there are different ways you can create your own cleaners. For the most part, if you have baking soda, some citrus and vinegar, generally those are some of the items that you can use for basic household cleaners. You can also look at different ways to fertilize your garden. For example, for myself, ever since the pandemic, I have started to compost. And so I have really rich soil now that I've been able to do that. You can also create your own mouthwash and bath oils. And so you can just simply do a quick research online to see, what is it that you have or what can you do to save costs. And for some of these, you'll be surprised. They actually work better than some of those cleaners that you actually purchase at the store. When it comes to home costs and energy, again, as I mentioned earlier, you want to buy your gas earlier in the week, and Tuesdays generally is your best bet. When it comes to preparing food, consider matching pans to the burner. I know for a lot of us, we think, oh, bigger is better, and that may not necessarily be the case. So for example, if you put a small pan on a large burner, you're going to be wasting a lot of energy. And so you'll want to use a smaller burner on your stove to match that pan. If you're just a household of one or two, consider using your toaster oven or even an air fryer instead of using your regular oven that heats up the whole house, especially in the summertime. Consider doing your cooking in something smaller. A great tip is to cover your windows. A lot of us like natural light. We get up in the morning, we open the shades, open the blinds to let in that natural light. But especially in the summertime, it's going to heat up your home and it's going to heat it up very quickly. It's a great tip to open your windows, especially in the wintertime, but in the summertime, the tip is to cover them. You can also consider LED lighting. And I know in my home, especially about 5 or 6 years ago, I changed out a lot of my light fixtures that were traditional fluorescent, and I changed it to LED lighting. And it was really neat to see how quickly I saved on my electric bill. And of course, if you're not comfortable doing it yourself, it's always important to hire a professional, especially if you aren't comfortable dealing with your electric panel and you just aren't sure on the wiring. A lot of energy companies also offer rebates or tax credits. And so those are things to also take a look at. I know for my electric utility company here in Sacramento, they often provide rebates on more energy efficient light bulbs and household appliances. Some of them will offer you a tax credit as well. From time to time, you may want to check your insulation or have somebody check it. For me, when I get my heat and air conditioning serviced every year, they do a quick check in my attic to take a look at my insulation level. And unfortunately, a few years ago, they made the recommendation that I needed to add more insulation, and I was surprised at the big difference it made. And so that's something to also keep in mind to reduce your energy costs. And so I know for the question about energy and peak times, the poll was about pretty even, about 50-50. It's important to check what those peak times are because there's different strategies that you can use to reduce your energy costs. Most places right now have a peak time from late afternoon into the early evening where you're going to pay the most for your utilities. And so it's important to think, especially in the summertime, you may want to consider cooling your house before that rate changes. I know as soon as that peak time is over for me, where I live, as soon as that time comes, I turn down that temperature for my air conditioning to be a little more comfortable. And so those are some strategies you can use. The other thing you can also do in the winter time is to heat your home accordingly. And so again, you may have different rates at different times. And so those are things to consider as well. And those strategies will help you save month after month throughout the year. A lot of us will have a cell phone or a mobile phone. Some of us still have landlines. One of the things that we know is having an unlimited plan may not make the most sense for you depending on how much you use. So it's worth taking a look at your monthly bill or asking your telephone company, how many minutes am I using in a month? Does it make sense to have an unlimited plan? Some people these days think, bigger is better. And so we like to buy, the biggest phone that might be available when in fact you may not need one. More and more people these days have a laptop or a tablet and a smartphone. Oftentimes you're going to use a tablet or a laptop when you really need to see larger things. And so, think about your individual situation. You may not need something so big. Some companies offer discounts for auto payment, and it might be $5, 5% per pay cycle. And so those are things to check out. You may also want to consider having a family plan or joining with some friends or neighbors that you trust. And so for myself, I'm still on my parents' phone plan, and it's a great way to cut down the cost because I did some research. And if I had bought my own plan by myself, I would be paying about $30 more per month. So over the course of the year, it's about $360, which is quite a bit of money when you think about it. For some people, if you don't use your phone a lot, a prepaid plan may make sense for you. And again, it's just based on your individual usage. And so you may want to take a look at that. Most of the time, your companies will offer you insurance. And of course, if you're going to use the insurance, you lose your phone a lot, or maybe you break your phone a lot, it may make sense for you to buy it. But you may also, again, want to check your credit card company. I know at the beginning of the pandemic, I had a doctor's appointment, went to grab my mail. I put my cell phone on the trunk of my car. And unfortunately, I drove off with that phone on the back of the car. And that's the first time I had ever done that. I was very lucky because my credit card company reimbursed me for the cost of the phone. And so it was a great thing to have. And again, passing on the insurance worked for me. And again, each individual situation is different. And so those are things to think about. These days, most of us are probably doing online shopping. It's convenient. You can order it from the comfort of your couch. It can be shipped straight to your front door. So what you always want to do is, again, spend some time doing comparison shopping. You may have that preferred retailer that you always buy from that you think is always the cheapest, but that may not be the case. If it's a big purchase, if you can wait for it, as we know, for example, when you buy household linens, towels, sheets, blankets, comforters, there's generally twice a year or so when those purchases are often always on sale the same time of year. Same sort of thing if you're buying large appliances or televisions. Generally, about twice a year, you'll be able to make those and save money. A good example is usually a couple weeks before the Super Bowl every year. Televisions are generally on sale a few weeks before then. Generally, that's the best time to purchase it. Depending on what type of purchases you make, there may be Prime Day deals, for example. Certain vendors or companies are now offering similar type of programs. And those are things that you can consider doing, especially if you don't have an urgent purchase and you can wait. You may also want to consider outlets. As I mentioned earlier, I know a lot of outlet malls, for example, they offer discounts for older adults on Tuesdays. And then one of the other tips, and I know I'm guilty of doing this, places that I frequently make purchases online, I tend to save my credit card information in my account. The best piece of advice to save money is to delete your credit card information that's saved. The reason why is it makes it very easy to make purchases when you've saved your account and you just hit that purchase button once you logged into that account. The more often you have to input your credit card information, you're going to be more likely to think twice. Do I really need to make that purchase? Oh, it's going to be a hassle to type in all those numbers again. And it really is a way to save money. And you'll be surprised because I've started doing that myself, especially accounts that I don't use too often. I delete that information. And then it's, do I really need this? Do I really need to buy it? The other thing too about not saving your credit card information is it also helps reduce your likelihood of becoming a victim of fraud. And as we all know, we get emails, phone calls, letters in the mail saying you've been part of a security breach. And so that's also kind of a way to help prevent that, is to reduce how many places you're saving that credit card information where a hacker may be able to get that and steal it. The other thing you can also do is to utilize AARP discounts. All of our information for AARP members you can be found online at aarp.org. Some of those discounts include a variety of restaurants, Walgreens, car rentals, prescription drug savings. AT&T Mobile is one of the more frequently new ones that a lot of people use depending on the type of plan you have. You can save money using Exxon Mobil, and it involves using their app. We have discounts on hotels, movies, and the UPS store, and those are just some of them. They often will change, and so those are things to keep in mind. For television or cable, it's important to think about your premium subscriptions. And so again, a lot of people think more is the merrier. I want HBO and all these other subscriptions like Netflix and others. Most of the time, you're only going to be watching one thing at a time. And so is it really worth having a bunch of subscriptions? It may make sense if you're in a larger household, but again, if you're in a household of one or two, oftentimes having a lot of subscriptions may not make sense. You can also look for freebies. I know for my cable service provider, there's some months where they have free viewing for certain channels. Also consider bundling. And so you may want to have a internet and cable plan combined together to save money. And then most important is to stop paying for subscriptions that you may have forgotten that you have. And so a good way to do that is to take a look at your credit card bill or your debit card bill to see, what am I paying? You may have forgotten you're paying, $2.99 a month for a certain game, for example, that you don't play anymore. Or perhaps you're paying for subscriptions for magazines that are just piled up on your coffee table. You may also forget that you were paying for certain TV services that you are no longer utilizing. You could also consider sharing streaming services. So, for example, in your household, it may not make sense for each person in the household to have a subscription to the same service. You can watch sports on the cheap, and again, by considering those channels and knowing what are they always on. And then, of course, there's also the old-fashioned TV. And so some people I hear, their main TV show, for example, is Wheel of Fortune. A lot of that's on network TV, and you don't need to pay for that TV. Let's see, do we have some questions now that we've gone through entertainment?
Yes, JR, going back to your first few slides, there's somebody who wants to know about what you said about oil changes, and they recommend 5,000 miles or every 3 months. But the person says, what if you hardly drive? Do you still need to change your oil at the given time?
That's a great question, and that actually falls into the category of myself. I generally don't drive that much based on where I live, and I had asked my trusted mechanic about the advice. And his advice was, if you don't travel that distance, the recommendation was still to change the gas about once a year, because then that way the oil that's been sitting there for a long time can be replenished with new oil. And so that was something that was recommended. And again, it may vary based on your vehicle. And you can also check your owner's manual as well.
Thank you. The other question somebody had was, how does selling a car privately get you a better price? Would you be able
Great question. So generally, when you sell it privately, you're generally going to be making several hundreds, if not thousands of dollars more. And so places where you can sell it privately would be to sell it online. An example, some people sell it on Facebook Marketplace, for example. You're generally going to make more money than if you sell it at a dealer or if you trade it in.
Okay, thank you. A comment here is for homebound people, grocery delivery charges can be very high. Do you have any suggestions on how to deal with that? And I know there was a back and forth thing that Walmart and Target give free shipping if you buy things that are over $35, but I wondered if you would be able to comment a bit on that.
Yeah, it can be tough for home delivery services. Unfortunately, there's not a great lot of competition or a lot of choices that are out there, so it's limited. The main thing would be to really consider the quantity and the sizes of the items that you're purchasing. And so as much as you can, that the ways to save money would be to perhaps make one purchase every other week instead of having home delivery every week. And again, it's all going to depend on your own situation. How much space do you have to store it? What are the types of food that you're purchasing that may have a shorter shelf life? One of the other ways that you can save money on home delivery is for non-perishable items, especially. Consider ordering those from other merchants instead of doing it through a home delivery service. And so those are some tips that you can also consider.
Thank you. Jacqueline, do we have time for one more question before we move on?
Yes, we do. A quick question and
Okay.
answer. Yeah, couple.
Yeah. So, all right. So our service protection plans, for large appliances, HVAC, plumbing services, etc., worth it?
Great question. So are service plans or extended warranties worth it? It unfortunately depends on the person. And so if you're somebody that's good at keeping large appliances clean, for example, that's a great way to save money and not necessarily purchase a plan. Generally, if you are buying appliances, if you do some research in advance, you'll get an idea of how long some of those items will last. For example, some of the household things that I purchase, I'm very specific based on reputation and length of life. And so if I have an item that historically will last decades, I generally will not pay for those extended services because they have a good reputation. And so those are things to kind of consider, but it does vary by person. And it also depends on frequency of use. And so if you're using items a lot, a extended service plan may make sense for you. And in other instances, if it's things that you're not using frequently, then those extended service plans may not make sense. And the other thing to also, again, is to keep in mind is, certain credit cards may cover, and then certain store policies are very lenient based on returns or defects as well.
Right. Thank you. And also doing routine maintenance, like cleaning the filters out, helps a good bit.
Absolutely. And that's moves right us into the next slide, which that's included. And so it's figuring out ways to make things last. So for example, if you buy bread in bulk, you can put it in the freezer and pull out what you need as you need it. If you take care of your clothing and use the recommended cleaning frequencies and temperatures that are on the tag, it will help last longer. A great tip that I have, especially as I travel quite a bit, is I always carry stain remover in my luggage. And it's saved me a lot of times to, hopefully get that stain out when I get home and put it into the wash. Most of us will have a coffee maker, and a lot of people use it frequently. It's important to take care of your coffee maker. So some tips are to regularly clean it. A lot of people will also be able to tell you that when they unplug some of these frequently used devices, it oftentimes will last longer. And so those are things to consider as well. For our garbage disposals in our kitchens, a lot of us, throw stuff down and you don't think about cleaning it. And there are actually cleaners that are out there that you can use that create a foam to get it really clean, and it'll help prolong the life. For toaster ovens, for example, another great tip is to keep it clean in order for it to last. And again, if you can, unplug it after you're using it. A lot of these electronic devices, when they stay plugged in, it's generally shortening the life over a long period of time. You can also consider using electric fans in your home, and it's important, as Sarita mentioned, keeping filters clean and regularly replacing them are important. We may have lawnmowers if you like to do your own landscaping. That's another thing to maintain, is to make sure it's regularly cleaned, and then to replace parts as needed and checking, where all the screws fasten. Those are things you can do yourself that are pretty easy to do to help prolong that life. And then when it comes to vacuum cleaners as well, some of us have vacuum cleaners that, maybe 10, 20 years old, and most of the time you can get those maintained as well. And a quick maintenance can clean it out and help prolong the life of those items. We can also consider getting things for free. Who does not like free? I love free myself. So places that you can consider doing is getting a free haircut. If you're not too picky on your hairstyle, you may want to consider a salon that caters to students, and they'll be able to do that for you. Sometimes that you may like it even better than going to your regular place. National parks are a great place to go for entertainment that may be free. For museums, some of them will have free days or a free day during the month that you can check out. Your own city may have free tours that are available, and some of them may cater to local residents only. Think about when you do your travel and where you're staying. Those are places to consider as well. Maybe you can stay with a friend or a family member, so you're not going to be paying anything. You can often get books for free. I know libraries are places you can check them out, but more and more we're seeing a lot of those neighborhood libraries that are have a stash of books in your own neighborhood, and you can swap it out as you are done reading those books. There's a lot of classes that may be offered, especially online. Today's workshop, for example, is free, where you're able to learn things, and again, all free. ARP events and experiences are also free, and so by you coming here, it's a great way to learn about the different types of offerings that AARP has. You can also consider getting items that are used, and this may be at a garage sale or finding it online at a very steep discount. Especially helpful if they're bulky items. You may be looking for furniture for a second property or a vacation rental where you're not looking to spend a lot of money and you may not need it new. You could also consider clothing. And so, for example, there's a certain brand of clothing that you always want to buy, and you might be able to find it gently used, new, and sometimes or in good condition. You could also look at technology. And so if you're not comfortable buying a new smartphone for device, you might be able to find it used, or you might be able to find it even refurbished. You could take a look at hand tools that may be available. So perhaps you have a neighbor or somebody nearby that might be moving out of town and they don't want to take a lot of things with them. And so you might be able to find a great deal. These days, a lot of us have a home office now because part of the time we're working remotely. And so you can consider getting an office chair, for example, that might be $10. If you're looking for some baby items, you might be able to find that as well. One of the questions we get often is, what do you mean by a used gift card? And what oftentimes will happen is people have a drawer of gift cards and they may have been sitting there for 5-10 years and they're still just sitting there. A lot of people who get cash for those items, and so consider that. And same thing goes for fitness and sporting equipment. For your credit cards, think about lower fees. You may have an annual fee or a high interest rate, so consider that. You can also call the company to waive fees or to get a better rate. And our last part on saving money will be including couponing. And so take a look at those ads and clipping coupons. There's a variety of stores and coupon websites that are out there that will help you save money. The biggest tip is to look at those expiration dates and buy only the minimum size. That's going to be your best way to get the most value and to save the most amount of money. The other thing you can also do for couponing is to look at those store apps and those sale items. And really the key is to buy what you're going to use, look at those expiration dates. And then there are also communities out there that allow you to donate or exchange coupons with others. And so Those are things that you can take a look at, and that'll help you save on those grocery expenses. Before we close up and I pass it back to our Tea and Coffee Tuesdays team, there's a few other events that are coming up that just wanted to share. ARP has a huge variety of offerings that are available for everyone. And all of those events can be found at aarp.org/nearyou. All the programs that I've listed up on your are on our screen right now are items that are virtual, and there's a variety that are coming up very soon. You can also do our free movies, which is aarp.org/free movies. With that, I hope you learned ways to save money, and hopefully you'll take the time to do it, because as you take time, you do some research, those are going to be the best ways you're going to be able to save money on those everyday costs. Again, my name is JR, and I appreciate your time, and I'll pass it back over to our Tea and Coffee Tuesdays team.
Oh, thank you, JR. It was a lot of good, powerful information. I got several tips. I didn't even know about using a small burner instead of a larger burner to do anything. I just don't even think about it. I just put it on. So thank you again for sharing those tips with us. I'm sure we all learned a lot. Before we close out, we'd like to take a quick poll about what you have learned. Put in the chat, what did you learn about saving money today? Sarita, has anybody put anything in there real quick?
A lot of thank yous coming in. I haven't seen, let's see. Somebody says join Facebook and buy nothing groups for free stuff. There's a buy nothing group. So Tuesdays seem to be the best day to fill gas. Take the time to use coupons. Thank you. Free cycle. I learned about the burner and car oil change. So yes, and a lot of thank yous. Brake less when driving.
Good.
It's a good.
A lot of good tips. And our audience was sharing quite a few good tips. So that's also very helpful.
Yes, absolutely. A lot of interaction there, a lot of good advice coming from each other. Yeah. So I'll turn it back to you, Jacqueline.
Okay, thank you so much, Sarita. If you are interested in rewatching this program or any of our previous programs, you can visit our Tea and Coffee Tuesdays webpage. The link has been placed in the chat. So, upcoming events, the next Tea and Coffee Tuesdays monthly meeting is Tuesday, September 10th, 2024 at 9 a.m. Pacific time, and we'll discuss solo aging. And of course, join us for the next event in our Piggy Bank Essential series on Thursday, September 26, 2024 at 9 a.m. Pacific time. Again, a big thank you to our guests, J.R. Fujita, our moderator, Sarita, our Cardoza, our tech specialist, Connie Moore and Sarita, and our AARP staff, and of course, all of you. Thank you so much for spending your morning with us again. Again, Jacqueline, take away and have a wonderful week. This concludes our program.
Hello, can someone stop the stream as well, please? The stream on YouTube. Letitia, you're able to stop the stream?
I didn't.